Oh, really? Okay, yeah, yeah.
But she doesn't come to our meetings.
Sherry, can you show me?
I was like, wow, we're really doing something innovative. All these people come. I was so proud. I thought everybody was interested.
All right, tell her hang tight.
Don't know.
That's okay. That's okay. I was getting a little nervous because I thought, oh, the bar just went way up.
Continue on. Approval of the meeting minutes, the February 7th, which was held virtually. Do we have a motion to approve or any changes to the minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
Have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
Second, Drew. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. The motion carries. Thank you. Staff reports. Johnny.
All right. Chair. All right, first and foremost, want to say good morning to each and every one of you, board members and staff that's present with us on today. We want to welcome, first and foremost, again, our newest member, Junior. He is now back with us now on the Landscape Architectural Board. And so, again, Mr. Simmons, welcome back to the board. We know that you're going to help make a difference right here on the Landscape Architect. Is there anything that you would like to say on today? Well, again, welcome, welcome. All right, and then another little quick note. Thank you to Sherry Moore for everything that she has done, and to echo the words from our chair and from also Ms. Dukes. It has been a pleasure working with you. It's been a pleasure that knowing that you're going to still be here until retirement years. So yeah, please don't go anywhere just yet until I decide to go someplace else too. So yeah, you're stuck with me for a little while longer. Sherry is definitely awesome. And I just really appreciate all the hard work that she's done and just all the hard work she continues to do for this great profession. So just as a quick housekeeping note so we can transition really quickly, as a housekeeping note, please be mindful, board members and staff, to speak directly into the microphone. However, if you want to mute yourself to have any kind of conversation, there is a button with 3 dots on them that is present there. So just hold that button down so that your voices will not be captured on the record. So as a friendly reminder, board members, if you don't mind, please direct all licensees and applicants to our office should they have any questions or discussions. Also in that same regard, should you have anyone from the media to contact you or any communications of the like, please refer them to my office or myself or to Sherry, and we will definitely converse with them and also channel them to the proper person to answer their questions. And also want to reiterate this to board members. There's been a few questions of other board members about their participation in association events. And just want to let you all know, as an FYI, it is okay for you all to attend those events. However, if you are going to attend, please don't attend in the capacity of a board member. You can always go as a concerned licensee, a concerned citizen of the population, unless you're actually invited on behalf of the board and the board has approved you. Please, ma'am, please, sir, if you don't mind, just show up to those events and represent a member of the actual profession itself and not the board. So we just want to make sure that each and every one of us, of course, keep under that safekeeping rule. We don't want anyone to be FOIA'd or spoke about in any kind of litigation matters. Currently, the board has 766 individual landscape architects and 223 firms actively licensed here in South Carolina. And a list of staff level licenses have been issued from February 1st, 2024 is included in the meeting handouts. 16 licenses have been issued since the last board meeting. And we're going to touch on this in the meeting materials, but CLARB annual meeting will be held at the Hyatt Regency in Buffalo, New York, September 19th through the 21st. The registration is going to open on May the 15th, and we are not able to process registrations until the fiscal year rolls over, and that's going to be after July the 1st. But we will approve members to attend as a later agenda item on today's meeting. Just as an FYI to you all, the landscape architect registration examination, or the LAIR, it will be offered July 29th through August the 14th, and registration opens in mid-May and closes on July 22nd. And if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I will go ahead and give that financial report as well.
Please do.
The board has a cash balance of $211,759.66, and that is of March 31st, 2024. And a copy of that cash report should be found in your board meeting materials. Mr. Chair and other board members, I will entertain any questions should you have any.
I guess no questions on this, and let's continue on with OIE report, I believe, it would be next.
All right, Mr. Chair, there are 2 cases in the Office of Investigations and Enforcement, and I believe that report should be in your board meeting materials as well. That does not require a vote, just for information only. For the investigative review conference report, there are no cases to report for that. And also in the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, there are no cases there as well. And that will conclude the staff reports, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moving on, item 9, board member reports. Do we have any reports from any board members? Hearing none, then we can move on to the IRC recommendations. Johnny.
Again, Mr. Chair, as we have been placing on the agenda for the past few meetings, we are looking for persons to fill the IRC capacity or the position of the IRC member. And for that IRC member, we're looking for a professional, of course, that is licensed in the capacity of a landscape architect that could provide some professional insight for this conference. And the conference consists of a few individuals that would be the board executive or their designee. That would be that professional member. That would be the member of the ODC's attorney staff member. And that would also be an investigator who would actually be on that conference. And what that office would do, or that committee would do, is that they would review those cases to see whether or not what those outcomes or what the recommendations should actually be to move forward with those open cases that they do have in that actual committee. Some would actually be a letter of caution. They could actually be a full hearing, or it could actually be found as a non-open or a dismissal. But that person on that IRC, they would be giving their professional recommendation from, of course, that professional stance. So if we have our legal counsel, she wants to clean that up just a little bit. If I didn't eloquently explain that piece of it, it's all good. All right, all good. So we're looking, again, for some individuals who could actually help us staff that IRC conference. So if you all have anyone that is a landscape architect that would like to help the board out in any capacity, if you don't mind, filter those persons through myself and through Sherry. We would do the vetting process, and we would send those persons on for the finality piece of it, and then we would bring that person before the board for you all to vote on that individual as well.
Just so that, I think we've discussed this a little bit last meeting, but just to bring it back up again, this individual that we're looking for are individuals that will be potentially coming to you. A lot of these meetings are held remotely.
Yes, sir, virtually.
The chances virtually, and so coming in is to Columbia's.
Right, it's very rare, but it was going to be really up to that investigator once they actually do open that up. I have seen a lot of those meetings actually be held virtually or by conference call.
And as a rule, you want somebody with some experience behind them in landscape architecture.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Have you received any?
No, sir, not as of yet.
All right. We need names.
And to clarify, they must be not just licensed, but licensed in South Carolina, correct?
Yes, sir. They can actually be licensed. Of course, licensed here in South Carolina, so they could actually have a reciprocal license in other states as well, too. So,
Thank you. All right. Clark, meeting travel approval.
all right, Mr. Chair, thank you so very much. Again, we just wanted to mention to you all the annual meeting that's going to be held coming September 19th through the 21st. So we just need a travel approval for, traditionally, it would be 2 board members and a staff member. But again, however you all want to motion for that travel this time around.
2 board members and staff, but we still, Edward, you're going to be in attendance. Clark.
That's correct.
So in addition, so we'll actually be able to, we'll have 3 people total from. Need volunteers, anybody interested in this September 19th through 21 to beautiful Buffalo?
Ooh, don't we just need to
We need to-
approve? Just approve
Just to approve is all
just
we're
approve
needing?
the
All
travel.
right, then, looking for a motion to approve travel for 2 board members, 1 staff member, September 19th through 21st, Clark Annual Meeting in Buffalo, New York.
I will make that motion that we approve travel to Buffalo for Clark's annual.
Motions, second, discussion, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. So in the meantime, start thinking about if you have any desires to attend that, please.
We will definitely put those feelers back out there via email, either myself or Sherry, and we will definitely get those names and get your names entered so we can go ahead and get that travel done and accomplished.
Okay, thank you. And Johnny, we'll move on to the new business with Veronica. I think I saw her popping up on the screen a couple times there.
All right, we will. So this agenda item has been placed on the agenda. This is something that we have been looking at to do. We actually had the opportunity to go to Nevada back in Clark's meeting last year. And this is something strategic planning that they did mention. And we just wanted to see whether or not if the board would be open to a little bit of the strategic plan that Clark is already doing. And at this time, we've got Ms. Veronica Meadows here from Clark. And I will turn this portion of the meeting over to her for her presentation. Thank you so much, Ms. Meadows.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for having me today. I just want to make sure everyone's able to hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. So what I'd like to do today is share kind of an approach to help support the board through strategic planning. So I am going to see if I can't figure out how to share my screen here. Hold on one second. All right, let's see here. I'm new to WebEx, so pardon me. All right, are you all seeing my screen at this time?
Make it go full screen.
I'm sorry.
Can you make it go full screen?
Let's see here.
No, it'll work. No,
If you start your slideshow, it should go to a full screen.
Are you able to see it now?
I think that's fine because we've got the same information on our laptops. Same
Okay.
slide deck.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started then. So again, just wanted to thank you all for having me today and to talk a little bit about strategic planning with the South Carolina Board of Landscape Architectural Examiners. Just want to talk a little bit about the benefits of strategic planning, the outcomes of strategic planning, and a possible schedule for your board, and then just kind of review next steps and an opportunity for you all to ask any questions that you may have. So first, let's just touch on the benefits of strategic planning. Just congratulations to your board for considering, either developing or updating an existing plan. Strategic planning really does help an organization develop a shared kind of sense of focus. Also, having a strategic plan provides, greater focus for the board in order to kind of anticipate some of the things that are happening. And that will have an impact to the board and its stakeholders. The other really important benefit of strategic planning is it gives the board an opportunity or a method for tracking progress against strategic goals. If you have a shared vision and you've kind of established some goals to help you get to that shared vision, you can create metrics around those to determine how quickly the board is making progress against those goals. Strategic planning also results in operational efficiencies for the board and really positions the board to have a proactive versus reactive response to things that are happening in our environment. Strategic planning also enables us to kind of identify maybe some orthodoxies that we have and question our thinking around, maybe this is the way we've always done things, but does it still make sense for us to do things in this way? So I always like to encourage, strategic planning for the simple fact that I know oftentimes licensing boards feel like they are constrained. You're enacted through your enabling legislation. And so you have very specific constraints with you that you must work within. And I've seen some boards kind of be like, we can't really do strategic planning. We have to, do exactly what we're enabled through statute to do. But I would say, we are also able to think creatively and strategically within those confines as to what the board can accomplish through the development of a strategic plan. So just to kind of touch on some of the planning session outcomes, what we would work through with the board is to develop a set of assumptions about the future that has the potential to impact the board and its stakeholders. So we'll look at things in the business and economic environment. We'll look at social values and demographics, technology, science, education, legislation, and regulation. And that helps to identify the things. I mean, we can't pay attention to everything that's going on around us, but we can prioritize these things but based on how impactful they are to the work of the board, to licensing and regulation kind of at a higher, at a national level, trends in what's happening in the landscape architectural profession. And we can develop that set of assumptions to be very specifically focused to what is most applicable to the work of the board. We'll also work through validation and or refinement of the board's kind of core purpose, core values, your vision for the future, and ultimately a very vivid description of what success will look like when you've achieved your vision. We'll work to identify a small number of goals that, will kind of articulate where the board will direct its energy over the next 5 years. And within the goals, we'll focus on some outcomes that will be beneficial to you and your licensees and other relevant stakeholders. Within our goals, we'll kind of establish strategic objectives so that we can set measurable, identify ways we can measure success over time. And then within that, kind of at the next level, a set of strategies or tactics that will identify the actions that your board will take in the next kind of 1 to 2 years, up to 3, to achieve the objectives in each goal area. And I will say that, establishing a small number of goals is, what I have seen be very effective. I've been, I think Sherry mentioned it earlier, I've been with CLARD for 25 years as well. So happy shared 25th anniversary, Sherry. And just having worked with boards over a long period of time, setting a small number of goals is really helpful because it is basically helps discipline the board in focusing on a small number of things that you can do really, really well versus, a large number of things that might take a little more time or be more challenging to execute against. I shared with Johnny and Sherry what a potential agenda might look like for a strategic planning session. You can see on the screen just kind of how we'll, allocate the time over the course of the day. So here is the proposed agenda for you. And then in terms of the timeline and next steps, obviously.
Can you scroll it up on your screen? We're still looking.
I'm sorry?
Can you scroll it on your screen? Because it's not rising. We're still looking at that same strategic planning title block on it, the slide.
This one, did you want me to go back to this one?
not seeing yours.
Nothing's moving on your screen.
All we see is the PowerPoint cover slide.
Interesting, because it is definitely working on my end. I apologize.
Yeah.
And so you're not seeing the slides advance at this point?
No, if you want
Okay,
to,
well-
if you'll just, as you discuss it, if you'll just tell us when you're moving to the next slide. We've got the same slide deck in front of us on the computer, so accomplish the same thing.
Okay, well, right now I'm on the timeline slide, so just walking through the timeline for kind of what the next couple of months will look like. By the end of the week, what I'd like to do is to send out a pre-session survey to the board, just to kind of get a general sense of what success will look like. And I'll take you through the very specific questions on the pre-session survey. And then pull the board back together, perhaps virtually, sometime in June or July to review the themes that emerge from the pre-session survey, and then begin to initiate our environmental scan. And then I think the idea would be to potentially hold the strategic planning session face-to-face on August 7th. So on the next slide, for the pre-session survey questions, first we'll look at, does the board exist for the same day, for the same reasons in which it was created? Why or why not? We'll look at how the board's work has evolved and where you see the greatest opportunities to create new value in the future. We'll start to identify some of those key drivers of change that have the greatest impact on the board's work over the next year. And I'll share some of the information we'll use to kind of help you all be able to answer that question. We'll also ask about one change you'd like to see implemented in the next year that will, increase the efficiency and effectiveness of how the board operates, and ultimately want to get a sense of what you all feel success would look like for your strategic planning session. So when I talked about the drivers of change through CLARB's membership with the American Society of Association Executives, we have access to a well-researched resource developed by ASAE that identifies kind of the 50 key disruptors through their Foresight Works network. And not all of these drivers of change will necessarily have direct impact to the board's work, but is a really good summary of some of the things that are happening around us that'll help inform, the development of those key assumptions about the future that we want to keep in mind as we're thinking about strategic planning. This is a great resource. There are kind of short summaries around each of these drivers of change, and we'll provide that to the board as you think about completing the survey and as an input to our environmental scanning exercise that we'll do prior to the August 7th planning session. And then lastly, when we come back together in that virtual meeting in the June-July timeframe, we'll begin to start to build out this environmental scan that where we'll finalize this when we're together face-to-face in August around, like I mentioned, the business and economic environment, technology, science and education, social values and demographics, and legislative and regulatory issues. We'll be able to prioritize the elements within each of these categories based on how impactful that you all believe they will be to your work. So I'm going to stop right there and see if anyone has any questions.
Hey, Veronica, this is Edward. Talk a little bit about the value of strategic planning, not just to an individual board, like not just to South Carolina's board, but to CLARB as a whole and defensive licensure sort of nationwide. Like, talk a little bit about the value of that, if you could.
Sure, Edward. So, again, I'll go back to, having clearly articulated goals, objectives, and strategies. And that's really important, not only for you as an individual board, but utilize or understanding kind of the broader picture of where landscape architecture regulation seeks to go into the future. So we could certainly inform the South Carolina board strategic plan with, CLARB's strategic goals and objectives. So you're aware kind of at the national level where CLARB is seeking to go. And the alignment, I think, is so important with CLARB, the National Regulatory Association, and its member jurisdictions. So, when we are all kind of rowing in the same direction, we are able to be much more successful as an organization and across the membership. I think we've seen a lot, and we'll talk about this when we start to build out our scanning work, but there is a lot, and I'm sure you all are well aware of, kind of the political environment right now, particularly the work to reduce regulations, to deregulate across the country. We're seeing lots of activity, across the country around, just deregulation momentum, and it's coming in various different forms. There's challenges to licensing boards and their structure and their authority. There are universal licensing bills that are being, introduced and adopted within jurisdictions that essentially require states to, license anyone that comes to them that is licensed in another jurisdiction. And we're just seeing the tactics evolve and get a little more, confusing in terms of, the approaches that the legislatures and governor's offices might be using to reduce regulation. And so we'll consider all of those things and have it, and being kind of overall in alignment really does help us as an organization, as a group of member boards, to all kind of, get to that desired future state together. Edward, does that cover what you wanted me to, or was there something else specific that you wanted me to touch on or that you thought would be important for the board to hear?
That's great. Thank you.
Veronica, how many other boards have participated in this strategic planning?
We have done strategic planning with, I would say 6 to 8 other boards in the last couple of years. Worked with the North Carolina board. We've worked with we're currently working with the Wyoming board. We've worked with the Oregon board, the Kansas board. Those are the ones that are coming to the top of my head at the moment, but I can certainly send a list if that would be helpful for you to see all the jurisdictions that we've worked with.
Just curious more than anything. And
Sure.
of those that you've done, the goal eventually is to, if you can, do this with every board, I assume, correct?
I'm sorry, say again.
Is the goal eventually to do this with all the boards?
Well, so the strategic planning support that CLARB provides to boards is kind of in addition to, the standard membership support that we provide. So it is an add-on or ad hoc thing that boards can do if they'd like to. Sure, we would love to work with every board in developing a strategic plan. That would be, amazing. But right now we're really just working with boards that have, expressed an interest in kind of either developing a strategic plan or reworking their plan. And so that's kind of, we're doing it more as an ad hoc service right now.
Thank you.
Sure. And just to give you a little bit of sense of my qualifications, I currently serve as CLARB's Chief Strategy Officer. So I work directly with our board of directors in the development of and execution of the CLARB's board's strategy and goals and objectives. Also kind of in my portfolio, I oversee membership. I also oversee advocacy and government relations, marketing and communications, and our PMO office. As I mentioned, I've been with CLARB for 25 years, so I'm very familiar with very specifically landscape architecture licensure and licensure boards and kind of the way that they work and operate. So I've got a lot of experience in the field, particularly as it relates to landscape architecture, licensure and regulation, but also partner with many of our other collateral organizations. So I work very closely with NCARB, the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, NCEES, National Council of Engineering and Surveying Examiners, and CIDQ, Council for Interior Design Qualification. So I've had exposure not only to landscape architecture boards, but boards that regulate our sister design disciplines as well.
A strategic plan does not need to be approved or adopted upstream, right, by state legislature or anything. It's something that we do here just between ourselves.
Correct. Yes. So the board strategic plan, you would be, adopting your strategic plan and working your strategic plan. And actually, if we go back to the proposed agenda, a strategic plan isn't necessarily, it isn't, designed to just be an activity that you do once every couple of years. The whole point of having a strategic plan is to identify kind of that long-term vision, then some goals and objectives that you can evaluate periodically to determine if you're making success or if you're making progress against that longer-term vision. The idea with a strategic plan would be that the board would develop this plan and then begin to integrate it into your strategic calendar, your board calendar. So, once you've had the opportunity to develop a plan, then you use that plan to kind of establish what your scope of work is going to look like over the next year. And then that informs how you develop your budget. And then at the end of the year, kind of getting back together to say, okay, we've been working over the last year to implement this plan. We've been able to, make some progress. So let's evaluate the tactics or the shorter term strategies that we're using to say, okay, have we achieved that? Can we do something different this year? So it really begins those, if you think about it, the goals are at the highest level, kind of set in that 5-year time frame. Your objectives are kind of in that 3-year time frame, and your strategies or your tactics are in an annual time frame. So it's really important that, the board, commit to not only just developing the plan, but working the plan and committing to that annual evaluation of the plan to say, okay, where have we made progress? Where can we begin to focus on maybe a little something different? But getting into that disciplined process of evaluating your plan on an annual basis is really important to kind of the long-term success of it. The other piece that we'll do when we're together, and this will just organically come out of conversation, these big cross-cutting issues will kind of emerge, and we're going to capture those. And we call them mega issues. They're big strategic issues that require some time, effort, and energy, and maybe even some background to better understand. And so we'll kind of make a list of these big strategic issues when we're together. And then the board will kind of prioritize, okay, we'd like to address this issue this year. So that might be something that would be integrated into, one of your board meetings as a conversation around one of those big cross-cutting issues. And this way, you're constantly feeding into the board's regular meeting cycle some of these bigger cross-cutting strategic conversations, in addition to regularly checking in on progress against, goals and that sort of thing. So it becomes a system that integrates into the board's calendar as opposed to kind of a one and done exercise. Because the development of the strategic plan is an important step by all means, but it needs to be integrated into the board's work moving forward in order to truly be successful.
Hey, Veronica, this is Laura. How are you?
Good, Laura. How are you?
Good, thanks. And this may be a question more for Sherry or Johnny, but you came down here, it's been years ago, 5, 6 or something. Was that strategic planning or was that a whole different?
That conflict analysis.
Well, it was a conversation around, the components within the model board. So we can take some of the work that the board has already done and that was really to kind of identify where there was friction in the process that didn't necessarily directly relate to a health, safety, welfare outcome. So the board kind of went through all of your systems and processes and said, do we really need to do this? Do we really need to do that? And if not, you all had conversations. I think that was one of the preemptive conversations we had that moved the South Carolina board from pre-approval for taking the exam, where South Carolina was pre-approving all of the exam applicants, and movement to the direct registration. There were several other changes that were made at that time, I think more, regulatory things. But that was really to kind of look at the operational pieces of the work that you do and identifying kind of where we could reduce friction. And that was in a conversation around, the model board, criteria that we talked through during that meeting. But that might be really helpful input to the strategic planning session. So good to think of that, Laura.
Veronica, if this board were to ever contemplate uniform standards as sort of being the precursor to that conversation?
Absolutely, Edward. I think if the board established a goal around, the statutes or the requirements for licensure, that might be a really helpful kind of place to move towards adoption of the strategic plan. The other valuable piece of the strategic plan is, when you're working the plan and doing that annual, evaluation, you can include in any kind of annual reporting to your legislature or your governor's office, that says, here are the goals that the board has established. Here are the things that we're doing to achieve these goals. And adoption of the uniform standard may or may not fit in there. Maybe it will, and if it does, that's great. And we would love to see that happen. But then you can report to the legislature that, and I'm just going to make something up off the top of my head. One of the goals is to ensure that the requirements for licensure for landscape architects in South Carolina are fair, equitable, and accessible. Again, just coming up with that off the top of my head. If that were a goal area, you could align that very closely with maybe one of your objectives would be to adopt the uniform standard. And then some of the activities or the tactics that would support that would be, okay, well, let's meet with the South Carolina chapter and talk about what this is going to look like and understand if we're going to get any resistance or whatever those stakeholders might be that you'd want to have those conversations with. So then you could begin to build out your plan to meet that goal of fair and equitable, or however we said it in the first place, licensing requirements. But that would be a way to integrate adoption of the uniform standard into your plan. And then when you report that, whether you all do an annual report or you have some sort of frequency for which you have to report to the legislature, the governor's office, you can include, we're adopting the uniform standard. This helps us to align with the national standards. It ensures that we have an effective mobility model to enable applicants to work quickly in the state. I mean, you can use those goals and progress against those goals to demonstrate the value of the board's work to the legislature or the governor's office. But there were some other things, woven into that response. But yes, Edward, I think you could very easily tie adoption of the uniform standard into your goals if that's what the board wanted to do.
Have a question? Any other questions?
Well, can you tell me what are some of the goals, other than enforcing existing laws? What should we strive to accomplish by serving on this board?
I'm sorry, was
Tell
that
me,
a question for me? Because
what are some of the
I had a
goals?
really hard time hearing it.
I think that's what we're going to figure out if we do. Question.
Veronica, I've got a question. Of the 6 to 8 boards that you've actually met with, have you seen any of the boards, their processes all the way through? And if you have, what are their outcomes?
That's a great question, Johnny. I'm happy to connect you with a couple of the board execs that we've worked with, if you'd like to talk to them. I know that in Kansas, they have definitely implemented elements of their strategic plan. They just initiated their plan, I believe it was 2 years ago. So I'm not 100% sure how much progress they've made against the goals and objectives that they'd identified at that time. But I'm happy to put you in touch with some of the board executives for those jurisdictions, and maybe you can talk about the experience, how the board has integrated that work into their regular calendar, what progress they've been able to make against the goals and objectives that they established. I'm happy to provide you with those board execs if you'd like that, if that'd be helpful to you.
Yes, ma'am, it will be. Thank you so much.
Sure.
2 quick points. In that same vein, Johnny, I wonder if we can get of other strategic plans that are out there, so that we can sort of, we can. Then, Veronica, another question is, if I'm looking at your proposed agenda, there's nothing in here that really talks about stakeholders. Wondering if maybe that's a little bit of homework that we should be doing to understand organizations like SCA, SLA, for instance, what their thoughts and feelings and what they're contemplating and dealing with and grappling with, if maybe we need to have a better understanding of that so that we can come into this day fully prepared. Thoughts on that, or what have other boards done?
Getting stakeholder input it can be helpful. I've also seen it not be very helpful. I think the board is most familiar with your work, and oftentimes when you ask somebody, how can we help you? They can't really answer the question. It's a little difficult to ask an open-ended question like that and get something of value that the board could use. As far as the development of your goals, that really should be an internally focused, conversation. What does the board seek to achieve? I think when you get to stakeholders, there's certainly a good time and opportunity to gather stakeholder input. But you may want to be focused in how you do that. So let's say, I get long-winded way of saying, I don't think you have to do that before your strategic planning session. I think you can do that once you have your goals established, and then you can get very focused input on specific topics, because just kind of going out to a stakeholder survey without having real focused questions or knowing exactly what you want to ask them can oftentimes be a little frustrating, because you don't get necessarily high value usable information. So what might be better, or a better approach to that, or another approach to that, would be to establish your goals and your objectives and have your stakeholder input inform your, annual, your strategies, those things you're going to execute in a year, over the course of a year, so that you can ask very specific questions around, that's going to give you helpful information for that goal area, but also in the development of, maybe your work plans. So that would be my recommendation. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Other question from any of the board members?
One other.
Yeah.
Edward mentioned is, can we get a copy of what other boards have done in this area to help us to kind of guide us as to where to go next? Can we get a copy? Would you be able to provide it to us? You work with other boards to do this?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to connect Johnny with a couple of the other board execs that we've worked with. Out of respect for their privacy, I would want to have their consent before doing so. But it might be helpful, because then Johnny can talk to them and kind of get a sense of what their experience was through the process. Get a copy of their strategic plan, which I'm fairly certain most of them are public information. But I would want to make sure that we made those connections first, just to verify that it was okay to share their planning documents.
Thank you,
But it
because
shouldn't-
I would
shouldn't be a
not know
problem.
how to get started without someone, kind of giving me a little direction and telling me, what other boards have done in other places. And since you work with them, I think you'd be a good source of that information if you can get their approval. And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess, to me, Johnny, the next move is to judge the board's interest in moving forward with this.
That is correct, yes, sir.
Are we taking a motion to participate, or just general?
Just discussion right now, I think, just.
Thank you so much, Veronica.
I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. I hope you all have a great rest of your meeting.
Hey,
right,
Veronica, a couple questions real quick before you get, this June, July virtual meeting, what time allocation would you put towards that?
I would say 60 to 90 minutes at most. What I'd like to do is, get the survey out to the board, get the survey results back, be able to kind of tease out the themes that emerge, so that you all can be aware of here's kind of where the board currently sits as far as its thinking around this. and then share those results back. And then we'll talk about some of that environmental scanning work that we'll do in advance of the August. So we'll have an opportunity to talk through the homework before the August 7th strategic planning session. So I think we could easily get through that in 60 to 90 minutes at most.
Johnny, it's a minor question, but if that event happens, is that driven by LLR, or is it driven, is CLARB hosting the meeting? And I'm just trying to figure virtually how it works.
Yes, sir. We'll have to host that meeting, and because you all are board members and you all be a part of that strategic plan meeting, it will be considered a board meeting and open to the public as well. So the same as we're here today at a board meeting, it will be notified as a board meeting as well for a working session. But again, the public will also be involved and notified that they could actually attend as well.
Okay, and then one more question. Looking at the proposed date of August 7th, that's also is our next board meeting date. Can this agenda be modified, carved out to allow the board meeting to occur within that same time frame?
I would really suggest that the board, allocate a full day.
You froze, Veronica.
Locked up.
Do a full day
No.
for the strategic planning. So maybe having, maybe a half day before, after the strategic planning for the board to get through its work. Again, this was an initial thought around the August 7th date. If the board would like to think about other ways to make this happen, maybe holding your business portion of the August 7th meeting virtually and then coming together face to face for the strategic planning session. Or if there's another date that works better, if you'd like to have a standalone session, not within the confines of a meeting, I'm open and flexible to that as well. This was just some initial ideas for you all to consider, but certainly flexible and can work with the board schedule in whatever way works best for you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Veronica? And we'll let her go, and then we can discuss internally. Nothing? Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentation.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, general discussion on that. Thoughts, desires, no desires.
Who pays them? Does that come out of the 200? To do what she proposes to do? I mean, can you tell me?
But we have not yet gotten a fee for the add-on piece of it for the strategic plan altogether, but we definitely would be able to give that information to you all prior to the actual portion of the actual strategic plan being put together altogether. So yeah, we would definitely have those numbers for you prior to that.
We don't have a clue whether it's $50 or $50,000.
Absolutely.
The
There'll be
board-
some goals that you're trying to reach before you agree to pay $50,000 to somebody. I mean, it sounds very hypothetical to me, and I don't know where this money.
Absolutely. And again, this strategic plan, the agenda item was placed on the agenda because of what CLARB had actually already had in place. Again, we know that you all have went through this already once before under a different administration, not knowing how far you all have gone in that process or been able to implement a lot of the items on that. But again, we wanted to open it back up just to see whether or not, if the board members, if you had any other ideas or anything else that you all wanted to touch on, or any other issues that you all knew about that would be beneficial for us to look at and be proactive about it rather than reactive in nature.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I'd like to know how many, do other boards within LLR have a strategic plan and have their goals and objectives set? Because, I mean, we kind of have just been addressing issues as they arise, and it's been quite some time since we rewrote the law and the regs and that kind of thing. And we just approach that as time comes around, so.
And to speak on that, and then to update you on that, I believe that my program area is the only one right now that's actually looking at strategic planning. And again, that came from CLARB when we went to the annual conference. It was just a great idea that I thought, and I've actually had strategic planning back in college and then carrying over some other things, and it worked well. So I brought that back here to LLR, of course, on the thought process of what CLARB had already done, but trying to implement it for my whole entire program area. But again, this is something that we're just discussing with the boards, nothing that you all have to move on. And to be quite honest and be frank with you all, and we've got the material here that has been provided from CLARB already. Is not recreating the wheels per se. We can build off what we've already known about. We can build off of what we have in our hands that are tangible, and not saying that we're forgetting about CLARB altogether. But this is something that the board actually could sit down and do some brainstorming ideas, and then being able to implement those ideas. And again, just being more proactive instead of reactive in nature.
So I think this is a very timely discussion, because I was telling my wife the other day, I said, I'm going down to Columbia tomorrow. She said, what exactly do you do down there? And I just had a litany of actions. I said, sometimes we evaluate CE requirements. Once every 2 years, we renew audit renewals, rather. Sometimes we look at potential new licenses, but it was an action. It was a list of things we do. Didn't really speak to what we're doing here as a group. Like, what is the purpose? What is our goal? Why do we even have a board in the first place? And so I think it's really important for us to be able to answer our wives and husbands better, so that we can answer the public better, why are we here, and so that we can answer our legislatures better, why are we here. But to Frank's point, and I think it's a very good one, we're looking at a return on our investment, right? If it's $50, of course we'll go for it. If it's $50,000, of course we will not, right? So somewhere in there is that spot where we say, yes, it's valuable, no, it's not valuable. And so we do need to know that, without a doubt. That is a critical piece of information. But I do think that in general, a strategic plan is a good thing for us to have as a board, so we know why we're here,
I
how
agree.
we serve the public.
No, I was just going to say, when Laura brought it up originally, I feel like we're sort of reinventing the wheel a little bit. Started on the strategic plan. Go ahead. Sherry, I wonder if you could find minutes, those meetings, when Veronica came down. I thought we talked about strategic goals. But then we kind of let it go. And I just think it is.
I believe what we did back in 2017, 2018, they call it a friction analysis. And we rolled it into our regulatory review that we were doing at that time. I did look back through the meeting minutes because I also was wondering, what have we already done? And some of the items that we took care of, we removed the pre-approval requirement to sit for the exam. That was a big one. We also established some better staff level licensure guidelines to get people approved for licensure better, and clarified our continuing education. Those were the three big things, and we achieved those goals. We got all of that done, and after that, there was just nothing else on the list left. The regulations passed, and we got things cleaned up. I think we did some cleanup on the applications as well.
High-level strategic plan goal. We didn't talk about that.
Not at this level. What I would call it is kind of, we took those first steps to clean up some of our internal processes. It was very helpful. It was beneficial. She came down for that meeting, and we rolled that into our regulatory review. It was very productive, but once the regulations passed, there really wasn't anything left on our to-do list at that point. So we considered it done, and I guess at this point we're looking at, is there more we could do? It's been a few years, and you like to look back over these things from time to time just to make sure you're operating efficiently.
I think it would be good. I definitely think we need a facilitator. I'm sure that there are local people that could help us, but certainly not as experienced as CLARB. So I think, money would check into that. The other thing would be the timeliness and, just being, honest with everybody's tenure on here. I'm not parks out there, but he and I both have been on the board for quite some time, and I think there's probably a transition of, how much longer would we do, and would it be good to have a strategic plan with us, but include, several other younger people that we might be grooming to, well, not necessarily grooming, that's probably not the right word, but exposing them to, what we deal with, so that they could potentially serve in a better capacity.
Open to the public and they're streamed. Now, we would like for them to get involved in that way. Always looking forward, try to keep us strong. This board has evolved tremendously. I mean, you talk about me being here 25 years. This board has evolved tremendously in that time. Y'all have made an amazing amount of progress. Strategic planning would be good just to make sure you keep that forward momentum going. I mean, I really think a lot of people look at y'all as an example of how a board ought to operate. I know CLARB frequently does. Other states do call me and ask, how does South Carolina deal with this or that? Y'all are a great example across the nation. Y'all have made some great strides forward.
And even also within the disciplinaries that we actually do have here, I look at when I actually converse with other disciplines that we actually do manage, sometimes I reference CLARB or reference the landscape board because you all have a great structure. And I said, well, Sherry, what is the landscape board doing? How has landscape actually taken care of this issue, this problem? And lo and behold, if we were to keep that same stance, that landscape that you all have already implemented, it works well for a lot of my other professions as well.
Boards in the agency do ask me very often how y'all.
Of course, this is my first meeting, so I apologize. Here's, you're going to have at least 4 members at the CLARB meeting. I think she says 5 or 6 of these have talked to the people from those states. Not a big favor of trying to do something in August.
All right, sounds great.
I agree with you on that. I think, one, I would assume that this board, if we're going to, whatever the fees that CLARB came back with, that this fee would have to come back in front of this board for approval.
Absolutely.
So obviously, our next board meeting's not till the 7th, and I don't know how efficient it is to do something as far as voting would go. So, but I also think that, the June, July, the virtual meeting, that's on us. We're here. And then August 7th, that is our board meeting, and I don't want to stretch people too much, but if we're going to eat up a whole day doing the strategic review, then we've got our board meeting also. Yeah, I think we're pushing it on Ken's behalf, to agree with you. I think we're pushing it. Not saying that it's not something we don't want to do, but I just don't know that we need to condense it down to this short of a time frame right now.
You have a meeting in November, and that's usually a very light. We go virtual for that one because it's mostly just reports and things from the CLARB annual meeting. At that point, we would have had an opportunity to talk to those other people. The annual meeting will be over.
Between September 19th and the November meeting to agree that it's something, well, we can't, because we would not have had the feedback from the board, from the CLARB meeting to review it. I mean, I'm not trying to kick this down the road, but maybe it's something that happens
Absolutely. Next year.
Be flexible with the time
Absolutely.
frame.
Great idea, and then that gives, Johnny, you can contact Veronica back and say, we want to really talk with the people at the annual meeting and kind of
Absolutely.
see what,
And more than likely, they're going to be at that annual meeting too, but we're going to do that preliminaries. We'll definitely, once we do get that, those names and email addresses, that contact information from those 6 to 8 member boards, we'll definitely start working then and reaching out to those individuals, just seeing what their progress was and their outcomes as well.
Yeah, if you'll do that in advance of that, that's going to save us.
Absolutely.
It's going to help all of us, I think, yes.
We'll do all the preliminaries prior to.
So here's what I've got 3 things I think that have come out of this conversation. Number 1, what is the fee? From other of strategic processes. And number three, just talk to those who have engaged in it. That covers everything, right? Because, I mean, ultimately, we have to make sure that we are, if we're going to be expending the fees that are coming from our licensees. Okay, so.
And if I may, just, I think I heard y'all talk about this a little bit, but to have a goal, because as you know, y'all are creatures of statute, and there's only so much you can do within what is, and it is a fabulous idea to have a great comprehensive strategic plan, but if you have absolutely no ability to implement it, then you're almost doing your licensees a disservice, not because of spending money, but because you have a plan that can't go anywhere. So I just keep that in mind. I think what y'all have done, I think Sherry mentioned looking at friction points and looking at your internal processes and where you can eliminate unnecessary points and streamline the process and make it easier to get licensed. And not to say that you shouldn't look at the overall process, but just some things you can do by regulation. Just understand if you have a big change or big thoughts for how things need to be done, that can't be done by the board alone. And it has to be done. If you want legislative changes, you really have to do that very carefully because this board is not authorized to do so. So I'm not trying to say no. I'm just trying to remind y'all of what some of the limitations may be. But being forward-thinking and being proactive is always a great place to be in.
And that's one of those things we would work out during that day.
How can you make a plan if you don't have goals? What are you trying to accomplish? I mean, I couldn't go home and make a plan about something in my life if I didn't have some goals that I wanted to accomplish by making that plan. And I haven't heard anything about any goals, just making a plan. So what do we want to get done to make your business better for you and to make it better for the public?
I'm
Can you
hoping
tell-
that information that Johnny's going to pull back with these other boards that have met is going to give us some of that insight, because I'm a little bit with you. I want to I need to get my hands around what we're doing, and I don't know that I fully have that at all.
I think
That's
that's
what-
the whole purpose of going to the Clark. Oh, enough to get started yet.
Well, I think, yeah, and I think that's what this proposed agenda that I'm looking at, that Clarb is offering to come down and help us determine that question. What is your goal? What is your objective? Until you know those things, you can't have a strategy. So, but we're not going to sit here and figure out what our goals are today by yakking around the table right now. That's what this entire day-long process is designed to do. And I think there's value in that.
Cart before the horse is what I'm saying.
I agree.
So I'll be anxiously looking forward to experts coming back and reporting to us think that we can do to as this committee to.
Johnny, I guess as you
Thank you.
receive this, can you disseminate it down the lines and let us,
Yes, sir.
and maybe by August, we can tell Veronica that we are considering, there is interest but we just want more.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We'll get that out to you all. But of course, you will blind copy everyone for that. So just directly respond to myself and Sherry as well.
Thank you. Any more conversation on this? If not, we'll move on. A new item on the agenda was agenda topics for future meetings. I don't know if anything prompted this, Johnny, or?
Nope, just actually incorporating some
just if we
things
needed to-
from other meetings. Yes, sir.
Did?
Yeah.
All right, so we now have that. Is there any reason or any motion to go into executive session? Hearing none. Our next meeting is August the 7th. Plan on it right now being back in this building. Don't know if we'll be in this room. Are there any other comments? I will entertain a motion to adjourn. A second, John. All in favor, aye? Aye. Thank you. Thank you for your time.